Welcome back to my channel for an ultra short Leica M11 episode. And I actually have here the Leica M11-P. Leica issued new firmware recently for the Leica M11, the M11-P, the M11-D, and it's with a couple of new features which I want to quickly show in a very short tutorial here on my channel. Let's kick this off. If you have not yet subscribed to my channel, please do so, subscribe, hit the notification bell and support my work. Many thanks for that. All right, there are basically three updates we find here in the new firmware for the Leica M11 family. And one major update of these three is the one where you can adjust the white balance right in the camera while you shoot. And I heard a lot of complaints about the Leica M11 and the M11-P having a little bit of a tendency towards a magenta color. And now you can correct it on the fly. You don't have to wait for your post-processing in Lightroom Classic or whatever you are using. And we are going to install the firmware now. I will do this via the Leica Fotos app. I have deleted my connection so I can show you from scratch how I'm doing it. And then we will explore the new firmware. The first thing we need to do is we need to switch the camera on, of course. So let's do this. Let's switch it on. Let's go into the menu, the moment in time the camera wakes up. And let's go to Leica Fotos. And this is here. And then here in Leica Fotos, I'm already in performance mode. So we go to pairing. What platform do you use? I'm using iOS. And then it asks me to plug in the Leica Fotos cable to pair this camera and your phone. I say I don't have a cable because I want to do this via Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. So what I want to do here is I go to plus and then we go to Leica M and then we choose the M11-P. And Bluetooth connection settings, that's all fine. Continue looking for camera. It should find the camera instantly, should not be a big drama here. And hopefully we can here switch to next. Here, camera found, Leica M11-P, connect. You don't need a cable if you don't have one at hand. It will go very, very quickly nevertheless, also without a cable. Finding accessories, here we go. It's my M11-P setup. Accessory paired, done. And I still have to wait. Camera added, Leica M11-P time sync. I think is convenient to have. Geotagging enable, of course. And then, yes, we get a lesson from Leica that with a cable, life is easier. I continue. And here we go. Starting Wi-Fi on camera. Let me put the camera here so you might be able to see it. This is my Wi-Fi notification. Here we go. And now if I go back here and exit this for a moment, let's get the gallery away. Then it says here immediately under Leica M11-P, update available. So let's choose it. You see here what's happening. There's also error correction included. Downloading goes pretty fast in my Wi-Fi network. And then it will beam the new firmware to the camera and the update process will start here on the LCD screen. We'll see this in a moment. It's very simple. I used to do all my firmware upgrades for all my Leica cameras many years via the memory cards, SD card or Compact Flash Express Type B card in case of the Leica SL3, but I find it more and more convenient just using the Leica Fotos app because everything is so easy and you can also not mess up things accidentally because it will always pick after it connected the correct newest firmware. You see a blue LED starting to flash here. And now it says firmware update in progress. I let the camera do its thing and come back when the job is done. Okay, so the camera is updated. We can also check the firmware now and see if everything did go through in the way we expected and hoped. Let's go to camera information. And then we see it's 2.6.0. That's just the correct firmware, the newest one. So here we go. Now let's look into these new functions we got in this new firmware here. So first of all, there's an interesting housekeeping point in Leica's release notes, and they recommend from time to time to format the internal storage. So let's see what we got here. Let's go to storage management. and we have this here. We go here to storage management. And then in storage management, I always set this up in a way that all my images end up on the SD card as well as on the internal memory, because I want to make sure that if my SD card breaks down, I have a copy in the internal memory. And if you want to choose that from scratch, you go here to DNG and JPEG on internal storage and SD card, and then you're good to go. We can also here move from the internal storage to the SD card, for instance, to export it via an SD card slot to a computer. And we can format the storage. And what they recommend is formatting from time to time the internal memory. Now, I don't have any files on this card, which I will need later on. If you want to do that and follow the housekeeping guidance from Leica, make sure you don't have an image sitting on the internal storage, which you later need. And I want to go here now for the secure version. That's what Leica is actually recommending, to remove all residual information which might still be in the internal memory. So I go here, and then this will take a bit, and I let the camera do its thing and come back when the job is done. Let's go to yes. Just to give you an in-between update, while this cleaning up, secure wipeout of memory is done of the internal storage, this is really a longer process. When they say this can take up to 75 minutes, they are walking the talk. Look at that. And it says, do not turn off the camera or remove the battery until the process is completed. Alrighty, we're there. Formatting completed. So this is the cleanup they recommend in the release notes of the new firmware. I've done it. It gives me a good feeling. And now we can continue to explore the couple of new functions we have in this new firmware. All right, so when the Leica M11 came to market, it didn't take long before I read the first comments on the following topic, namely that the Leica M11, and by the way also the M11-P, have a tendency to have a bit of a magenta tint. And people really didn't like it, and I fully understand it. I personally can correct this just fine in post-processing. But if you want to take your images out of camera, maybe quickly post them on social media, what have you, then this is annoying. And now Leica has given us a white balance fine adjustment tool in the menu, and that will solve this problem for you forever, which is great, of course. So how do we find it? Let's go into the menu. Let's go here to page number 2 and to white balance. And then we have here a white balance adjustment. And if you go into that, you find here a little cross, and you can move this freely with your finger by the touch functionality of the screen between 4 different points, namely yellow, blue, green, and magenta. So let's say you want to have your image fine-tuned towards a colder temperature. You put your cross here towards blue, and then you have it. And if you want to confirm this by a push on the center button, it will stay there. If I go into that menu again, you still see the cross here. See? It will stay there. And that is a fine adjustment, a fine tuning that happens on top of what is set up here. So if I'm in auto white balance, which is my standard mode here, I always tweak white balance only in post-processing. The camera will still do its job and choose the for the camera settings correct white balance, but it will add on top that fine tuning I have adjusted here. If I want for a moment deactivate that fine tuning, I can deactivate it here. And I show you quickly. So here now we have adjusted this towards a colder temperature. Let me show you again. We have the cross here towards a bluish tint. And let me take that shot. And now I go back into the menu. And in the menu on white balance, we say now the white balance adjustment off. Then this fine tuning is no longer applied to whatever happens in the white balance mode. Have a look. I take another picture. And now if I go into play mode and compare them, this is without the bluish tint and this is with the bluish tint. You see, here it's a bit colder, the whole temperature in the image. Here it's without that colder tint. And that is very easy because you can now here easily in the menu adjust whatever you like in this fine-tuning screen here with green, blue, magenta, and yellow. And it will always stay where you place it. In my case, I put it to a colder atmosphere here. And if you want to use that fine tuning, you go back in the menu and you make sure you have this here on. But if you want to, for a moment, pause it, deactivate it, you switch it to off, and then whatever is set up here with that cross is actually no longer valid and not applied as a fine adjustment on top of what's happening here in white balance in the main white balance mode menu. If I switch this on again and I go here into that calibration screen and I want to center it back, I just move it back with my finger, and if I don't really hit the middle of this grid, I just use the 4-directional button here to place it exactly in the center. I confirm, and then it stays there. You know, and now it doesn't matter whether I have here on or off. It's centered anyway. So whatever the white balance algorithm is deciding here in my mode menu will apply immediately to my image. Simple like that. The second feature, which I also consider to be relevant, is about lens detection. And that works in the menu in the following way. Or maybe I should first unmount this lens for a moment. Let me switch off the camera quickly. Let me quickly unmount the lens here. This is a Safari lens. So let's push the button here. Let's screw it out. And if you look here, you find 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 little fields, and they can be black or white. And this is a 6-bit coding which the camera can read. I'll show you quickly. Here, this is the reader for the 6-bit optical coding. And every lens in the Leica M lens lineup has a unique code with these 6-bit here. And the firmware in the camera body recognizes, based on what's black and white here, what Leica M lens is mounted. And in this way, you find, for instance, that this one here is a Summicron M 50mm, widest open is an f2. You find this in the metadata. And it's also used to apply certain in-camera corrections, because Leica, of course, knows their lenses very well. And then it will apply automatically some corrections, for instance, to distortion, or maybe on the edges, some improvements, what have you. And this is the lens detection, and it's a 6-bit coding. Now let me show you in the menu where you find this lens detection menu item. And Leica gives us now much more flexibility here. It's on page number 1. It's the first line item, lens detection. It's currently on auto. Whenever a Leica M lens has a 6-bit optical coding, leave it on auto. The camera body will do its thing directed by the firmware and detect the lens. And then you're good to go. If you don't want the in-camera corrections to be applied, you can also switch this off. And then, you know, you get the edges which you get from the optical properties of the lens. You get the distortion you get from the optical properties of the lens. There is no in-camera correction going on any longer. And in some situations, this might be desired. So you can switch this off. But I recommend, whenever you have a 6-bit optical coding, leave it on auto, and then the camera will do its thing. You can also manually adjust this now. So if a lens has no 6-bit optical coding, you can choose here from a list. And currently there is nothing populated here, but I can now go into this list of M lenses and activate here. You see they are all switched off for the time being, and activate the lens I want. Let's take a 50mm lens here. Let's take this f1 50mm. I switch it on, and then if I go back, I have it here available. And now I can manually choose it if I'm in the manual lens detection setup. That's of course not the correct setting for this lens here, so I better don't choose it. But you see how it works, right? I can choose another lens, let's say here a 21mm f2.8. And by the way, you always find the product number here next to it. Let's switch this also on. And then I have 2 lenses here, which I can choose. And that is a lot of flexibility we get now here. I want to deactivate them all for the time being. Let's go here back, and let's go here. Let's say this is off. Let's go back into the 50mm camp. Let's also switch this one off. I don't need this at this point in time, because most of the M lenses I use, they have an optical coding. But if you need it, you can basically operate it here. And then you have the same menu entry, which is currently grayed out, because I don't have the R lens to M mount adapter mounted. You can also adjust this here for Leica R lenses if you want. And I have actually a bunch of R lenses, which I use from time to time on Leica M camera bodies and Leica SL bodies. But that's the way it works. If you have a 6-bit optical coding, you want to rely on Leica's camera internal corrections, and you want to have the correct lens in the metadata, leave it on auto, and then you're good to go. Last but not least, the dust protection function in the menu can now also be controlled via the Leica Fotos app. Let me quickly show you in the menu and explain what it is. So if we go here into camera settings on page number 4, we have at the very bottom here, we have dust protection. If this is off, I can now take my lens off. Let me quickly do it. And we will be able to see the sensor. You see here, you see the sensor. Hopefully you see it a little bit. The sensor is visible. The shutter is not closed. Let me get the lens on again. Snap it in. If I switch this on, then the camera detects by itself whether a lens is mounted or not in a hot swap situation like I just created here, and will then close the shutter in order to protect the sensor from dust. Let's remove the lens again. You probably heard the sound. And now the shutter is closed. Look at that. And the sensor is protected. But don't read this in the wrong way. This is the mechanical shutter you see here. It's a curtain, right? Don't ever touch it. It's not a protective shield like you find in some other camera brands. It really is the mechanical shutter curtain, which you see here, which is protecting the lens from dust. And that's what shutter protection on is doing. Let's mount the lens again. That's the way it works, and you can now also control this via the Leica Fotos app. There is a setting in the app which you can use to remotely switch this on or switch it off. As a side remark, it's very tempting to believe that if you want to clean the sensor, you need to leave the camera on and dust protection off, because then the shutter will not close. You get access to the sensor. And typically, if you shut down the camera, if you power it off, the shutter will always close. But that is a dangerous game, my friends, because let me show you. Dust protection off, and let me get the lens off. Maybe I can generate a situation. So now we should see the sensor and all of that. But if the battery would, for instance, all of a sudden get drained and the camera would power off, or something unexpected would happen, that during the cleaning process, all of a sudden the curtain, the shutter closes. And if this happens, it will get damaged. So you should never clean a Leica M11 sensor by saying dust protection off. Yes, you can see the sensor, but you have the camera powered on in a way which is not safe for cleaning a sensor. If you want to clean the sensor, go to sensor cleaning. And then you say, do you want to start the sensor cleaning? Yes. Switch off camera after inspection. And now you are in a safe mode. Now you can access the sensor. The curtain is not closed, so the shutter is open, and nothing unexpected will happen. No situation will occur where the shutter all of a sudden closes and then gets in collision with your cleaning tool here. So this is the safe way to clean the camera. It says, please switch off camera after inspection. Now the camera is aware that there might be a cleaning tool inside, that you are working on getting your sensor in a more clean state, and nothing will happen that surprises you and can damage your shutter. So use always this mode if you want to clean, and do not experiment with what I showed you before, dust protection off, and then the camera is on and you think you have clean access to the sensor. And by the way, you heard me saying whenever the camera is switched off, the shutter closes. So if the camera is switched off, you can always safely change lenses on this camera body here. If I now turn the camera around and show you the sensor, and it says, please switch off camera after inspection, if I do that, the shutter will close. Have a look. A bit of LED activity here, and then the shutter will close. It gives you a few seconds to remove any cleaning tool, and now it's closed. You see that here? Now the shutter is closed. So it even gives you a pre-warning with that red LED. If you were cleaning the sensor and you switched it off, you have a few seconds to remove that tool. So if the shutter closes, it will not get damaged by a cleaning tool in the way. And that's basically all. That's everything that we got in the new firmware. I must say the Leica M11, M11-D, M11-P, what have you, firmware update is by far not as spectacular as what we just saw by the end of the year in firmware update 4.0.0 for the Leica Q cameras and of course for the Leica SL3 and SL3S. But it is meaningful improvements we see here. And if you belong to the group of people who, when the Leica M11 was finally in their hands, complained about a magenta tint, you have now the tool to control it, and hopefully you will like it. And hopefully you guys also liked this presentation. If you liked it, don't forget to drop me a thumbs up. Stay tuned on my channel. There's always more to come. Thanks for watching. Stay safe and healthy. And of course, peace out.